Welcome, everyone. I'm Scott Payton, Business Development Manager for Exemplar Global. I'll be moderating this session along with Andrew Baines, President and CEO of Exemplar Global. Thank you for joining us for what promises to be a very interesting and provocative session today. Before we get started, I just want to explain to our audience how this session will work. This webinar is pre-recorded and has been edited for clarity. Those of you viewing this session can participate by posting your comments and questions in the comments section on the page where this video is playing. We will monitor those comments and respond to as many comments as we can. We encourage you to check back periodically to see new comments, questions, and answers. This session kicks off our year-long thought leadership series on the future of auditing. We'll be presenting webinars at least once a month for the next year that will examine the future of the auditing profession. We'll include a mix of live and pre-recorded webinars, panel discussions, individuals presenting new ideas and concepts, as well as some more traditional tools and technique type sessions to help auditors acquire the skills necessary in this brave new world of auditing. Today, our session consists of a panel of individuals representing the various segments of the auditing profession: accreditation bodies, certification bodies, and a personnel certification body, Exemplar Global. Most of these people have auditing experience themselves, so they also serve to represent the auditing community. Before I introduce the panelists, I'd like to tell you about a news story I read in the New York Times just a few days ago. It was about Xerox. Once a $60 billion company with 100,000 salespeople spread around the globe, Xerox has, after years of declining sales, literally ceased to exist, as it has been finally completely absorbed by Fuji of Japan. There are countless examples of large companies that have disappeared. So why look at Xerox? Quite simply, because it had the future in its hands and it let it slip away. Xerox flourished by leasing copiers to companies and charging them every time a piece of paper passed through their machines. They called this a click, quite different from the clicks we count today. Salespeople counted clicks to make their money. Now, back in the late 1970s, Xerox CEO realized that his company might need to look beyond copiers and counting clicks. So he assembled a team of experts to design the office of the future and set them up in Palo Alto, California, creating the famous Palo Alto Research Center, or as it's more commonly known, PARC. These experts did their job fantastically. They created the graphical user interface, the mouse, the desktop laser printer, the Ethernet, and essentially the prototype for today's personal computers. Now, when they excitedly demonstrated to Xerox's senior executives, the response was, yes, but where are the clicks? Xerox couldn't grasp the importance of what it had created because it didn't fit with its existing business model. Little did Xerox know just would be in the digital space. Steve Jobs toured PARC. He immediately understood this technology would revolutionize business, and so did Bill Gates. Xerox literally had the keys to the kingdom in its hands, and it let them slip away. I'd like to posit to you all that the future is here. The technologies, the industries, the techniques, and the tools are here and now at our disposal. Will we let them slip away and become irrelevant, or will we seize the keys to the future? I'd like to introduce our panel now. Andrew Baines from Exemplar Global, John Knappenberger of ANAB, James Galloway from Jazzance, Ben White of PsyQual, Adam McDean of QMS Certification Services, and Joseph Kolakowski of Perry Johnson Registrars. I'd like for each of our panelists to briefly share their thoughts on what the new and disruptive technologies, industries, and other catalysts for change are. I don't want you to go into great detail at this point. Let's just get your ideas about what these new things are. We'll talk about how they're going to affect us a little bit later. I'm going to start with Andrew Baines. I'd like you each to introduce yourself, say who you are and what you do briefly, and then toss out your ideas for some these industries. And Andrew's going to talk a little bit more in detail than I'd like the rest of you to do. So Andrew, take it away.
Thank you, Scott, for the opportunity. Andrew Baines, Chief Executive Officer of Exemplar Global. I have some 25 years experience of auditing as an auditor and in management of certification bodies, and more latterly as a Chief Executive of a personnel certification body. I think Scott's introduced the topic very well. We're all very used to the idea that times are changing, to the extent, in fact, that that's something of a cliche, but it's certainly true. Never been truer, and it's something to do more with the pace of the change, I think, that we need to be concerned with. And I wonder, for all that we talk of understanding how fast things are changing, whether we really appreciate just how fast. I read a piece of data just this very morning from the Persistence Market Research, who done some research into ISO certification market. And they valued that market in 2017 at 11.8 billion US dollars. What's alarming is that they have estimated that in 2025, that same market, the ISO certification market, will be valued at $2.8 billion. That's a huge and alarming reduction in value that they're perceiving, and we could well question why that may be. But the fact is that the change is here, it's upon us. If you look at the changes in industry, examples like Uber own no cars at all. Facebook creates no content. Alibaba doesn't carry any stock. We have emerging artificial intelligences such as Siri, which emerged in 2011, Alexa in 2014. What do we really mean by disruptive technology? Well, what we really mean is the Internet of Things, robotics and artificial intelligence. And some of those figures around the Internet of Things are themselves quite staggering. It's estimated that in 10 years' time, there will be 50 billion interconnected devices, and in 20 years' time, as many as 500 billion devices connected. In terms of artificial intelligence, a usable quote for that, a description of what it is that technology capability that allows for machines to independently observe their environment, learn and solve problems. So they're self-learning, not just what you teach them, but the self-learning. PricewaterhouseCoopers have issued and published a claim that in 15 years' time, 38% of jobs are at risk of being replaced by artificial intelligence. How are we going to place ourselves to audit those replacements, whatever they may be? We don't yet know what they may be. Gartner claimed that by 2018, the year that we're in, 20% of business content will come from artificial intelligence. I wonder, how are we auditing that content now? Because it's only going to increase in the future. Gartner also estimated that in 10 years' time, 1/3 of us will be unemployable. That's not unemployed, but unemployable. We won't have the skills to be able to do that. So how are we going to audit those replacements? On the other hand, US Department of Statistics have claimed that occupations in computer science and information technology have added 785,000 new jobs from 2008 to 2018. Again, my question is, are we ready to audit these new types of jobs that are going to emerge? And we'll do so very quickly. Deloitte's claim that the impact on the workforce at the current time suggests that 41% of companies have reported that they have fully implemented cognitive and artificial intelligent technologies within the workforce, and 34% are in the midst of pilot programs. So that's 75% are already doing something, but only 17% of global executives are ready. So how ready are we? How ready are we as a community that work and serve these industries for these changes? Disruptive technology, you could look at in this way. The point of it, intention of it, is to reduce variation, to eliminate waste, to increase productivity, and to increase efficiencies, to increase revenue and decrease expense, if you will. that's exactly what we are aiming to do through the quality community and all that have spun off from that. Same things: reduce variation, eliminate waste, increase productivity and efficiency, and increase revenues and decrease expenses. So it seems there's certainly the potential of a very good fit there. But I have two very fundamental questions for our community to consider. What does all of this mean for the industries, the sectors, the products and the services that we audit? How are we going to audit those technologies? And secondly, what does it actually mean for us as an audit profession? How will we upskill ourselves? How will we use the new technologies? Could they replace auditors? What standards and benchmarks will we use? And how will we keep up with this pace of change? There are many other questions, of course. How can we leverage things like online audits and virtual audits? Can we use some of the technological tools that are already with us, things like Google Translate and Google Glasses? Could we actually use artificial intelligence as an audit assistant? Something like Siri or Bixby would know the standards, all of them. One of the things has been the explosion of the number of standards and the changes of them. It could carry them with us. It could refer us to best practices and possibly write reports for us. So I could see a day when we have an artificially intelligent companion to assist. But what opportunities lie in there for us to audit, to test, to certify artificial intelligence and indeed robotics? Are we ready for that? And can and should we use things like social media when we're auditing, things like Glassdoor, which is employees commenting on their employers? And I'll leave you with this fact. In 1980s, we had around 4 billion people, half of whom were literate. And we ran around trying to solve things using pencils, basically. Now, there are 7.5 billion people, 85% of whom are literate, and most of them are carrying smartphones that are more powerful than the computers that we use to land man on the moon. I wonder whether that could be our future workforce. What I do know, and the thought I want to launch this with, is that this is actually happening now. This is not in the future any longer. We as a community, I think, need to therefore act now and to be part of the future, or risk becoming another Xerox. To take that figure that I mentioned in terms of the ISO certification market, do we want to take the chance that we will be part of the 2.8 billion that survives, or can we actually do something different?
Thank you, Andrew. Joseph, I know you'll need to be leaving us soon. Would you like to make some comments at this point? Let me unmute your line.
Can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. I have a couple of things that I want to weigh in on with this, and it's actually interesting timing. I had a client reach out to me today with some interesting commentary that an auditor made to him, and I thought, well, that's a good point. The client indicated to me they want to go paperless. They want to go as completely paperless as they possibly can. It's part of a green initiative for them. And the auditor that they were working with said, well, that's a great idea, but how are you going to validate the software's capability to do what it proposes to do, to make your records available, to make your to keep your records safe, things like this. And I dug into ISO 9001 and I said, well, there's nothing in there specifically that says that that type of validation for records is necessarily required. So the short answer I gave the client was, nice idea, but not necessarily required. You as the organization are responsible for making sure that your records are secure, retrievable, and so forth. But it got me thinking about today's call. I thought, yeah, that's an angle. That's how we add value to the audit process is, do we have the skill set to look at a cloud server, the skill set to look at a a record storage vessel, if I can call it that, and either call it good or say, ooh, we've got some holes here. And I would absolutely qualify that as a challenge, because I think the vast majority of companies that are ISO 9001 certified, certainly the vast majority that I have personally dealt with, they're savvy, so to speak, for computer systems. It varies, and many of them are going to be on the low end of the scale in terms of comfort for dealing with those systems. So, you know, they look to the auditing community and they expect us to know what we're talking about, and they say, well, I spent $5,000 on this suite of software. You can look at it and tell me if this is going to get the job done. And that's a real challenge, to look at one software program versus another, and you know there's going to be a lot of companies out there that are going to throw their head into this game and say, we can manage this and we can take care of you. So I view that as a challenge and also as an opportunity in terms of how a certification body, how an auditor could position themselves and say, yes, we can look at this and we can provide value-added assessment of this vis-a-vis compliance to ISO 9001. So that's definitely something I want to put out there, and I think the panelists would agree with me. So many of our clients look to us, and it's not just about are we ISO 9001 or equivalent compliant? It's, are we doing this the right way? And obviously we can't consult, but that's sort of the implicit expectation. Tell me that what I'm doing is the right way to do what I'm trying to accomplish. So I want to put that out. Hopefully folks agree with some part of what I've said here.
Thank you, Joseph. Andrew, did you want to add anything to that?
No, look, I do agree the points made. In fact, if anything, just to challenge them even further, I think we have to find solutions to those sorts of problems to be able to continue to be relevant. We need to challenge even some of the old mantras about consultancy and whether we can and do that and how we should do it. I think we need to be able to access into the technologies to be able to use that artificial intelligence to be part of the software analysis projects, for example, and perhaps we need to learn from them.
Great. James, how about you? Would you like to weigh in?
I think probably you'd like to step back from, if you like, some of the technology issues to some of the underlying, if you like, performance issues that still exist around the industry. We see lots of auditors. Some of them are quite outstanding. Some of them are not. And I think one of the things that we picked up that separates them is really the extent to which the really good auditors have a clear sense, understanding, and exposure to really fundamental understandings of business organization, of supply chains, of relationships within business, of the ideas around process, and the way they're able to bring those to bear to help their clients understand challenges, threats, opportunities that are confronting them in their environment. To me, that's a really impressive approach to audit, and it kind of signals what I think is needed in terms of right across the industry to keep the industry current, vital, and adding to economic performance, business performance, and consumer welfare. And so from our point of view, and I'll perhaps ask Catherine to weigh in here because she'll be driving a lot of this, we're sort of looking at our own rules and our own methods and thinking about, well, how do we leave the certification body spending less time focused on us and give them more time to focus on their clients? So one of the things I put forward is that accreditors kind of need to look at their rules and look at whether in fact they're working to free up the industry, deliver the best, deliver the ideas about improvement in business performance that are so clear in the family of management system standards now, or whether they're just focusing on rules and documents.
Hi, Catherine Lockyer, General Manager Services from Jazans. Just further to what James has been saying, we are well down the path of developing a process-based audit technique for our accreditation assessors. And we're also pushing this out to the conformity assessment bodies. Even though process-based auditing is not new, it's been around for a long period of time, we still time and time again see certification body auditors doing clause-by-clause, checklist-based auditors. Last week, I was speaking to somebody and they were saying in this day and age, they hardly ever see their certification body auditors leave the boardroom. They come and do a purely record-based desktop audit and are not actually out there looking what actually happens. And I think in a way, the industry as a whole is responsible. We have scheme owners who develop systems and schemes which actually require auditors to sit and do checklist type audits. We have international standards which focus on technical expertise, but in actual fact, in the world we're moving to, and leading on from what Andrew has said, we really should be looking at business processes, and maybe our auditors for the future are more business analysts than technical people. So thinking wider afield than that. A number of the systems and standards that we actually work to, which we're asked to do as part of the accreditation environment, also doesn't even consider how a business operates, but considers more around what I would say very 1990s type views around what an audit should be. And so I'm not seeing some progression in some of those standards. So the challenge for us as a community is to be involved in the development of these, to make our voices heard, and to actually think about what's happening for the future. I have a conformity assessment body currently who is actually in the process of looking at trialing technology where their auditor will sit in their office, wherever in the world that may be, and the person in the plant manager, the operator, will be wearing glasses and will walk around doing the walk around of the audit. And the auditor will be sitting back in that office actually doing it via their computer screen. And that's happening now. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Scott, could I maybe just make a comment there? This is Andrew again. I'd like to just agree with the points that Catherine and James are making. And again, just suggest to us all that we can embrace this technology to these ends to enhance the offering of the process that we're following. The real threat to us as a sector, as an industry, is not from within and between ourselves, but from those that do not use us at all, those that bypass the use of this because they don't see any value into it. I think for us to be able to collaborate together, to network some of the skills we have whilst recognising things like confidentiality and so on, absolutely so, but we have the opportunity to use considerable amounts of data to share as to what best practices are to enhance performance and to use technology to assist us in doing that. I think it also has the opportunity for us to address age-old challenges like things like consistency or lack of, and ethical questions as well. So yes, I agree very much with the points that Catherine raised.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Ben, how about you? Would you like to comment?
Yep, good morning. Ben White, General Manager, Cyqual International. I may be unique in this group in that I'm not an auditor. I came into this business about 8 years ago, completely fresh to the business. So it's been an interesting journey, let's say. I agree with what the panelists have said so far. I think for us, the challenge is in certifying or in auditing a client is not just to see how they comply with the standard, but how we can help their business to run faster, if you like. So very much an improvement focus rather than a compliance focus. Obviously, the auditor is verifying the compliance because that's a requirement. But in terms of encouraging people to get certified, it is very much how this can help your business, not just how we can tick all the boxes that are required. I think one of the challenges that we're likely to face, and it's sort of picked up a little bit perhaps by what Joseph said, there are a lot of organizations out there at the moment who are moving more and more into that virtual entity, if you like, where many of them don't actually have offices. They're operating on laptops and iPads and whatever. And the traditional thing where you visit head office, look at their processes, and then perhaps go out to some of their sites and some of their branch offices and do the same thing, is becoming harder and harder to do because they don't have a head office, or there is no sort of physical place where people meet. I think some of the new technologies, the app development and whatever, where we've now got apps that can do simple things. We've got apps that can tell us where we are, what we can eat, etc., etc. And I think some of those things are things that auditors could use, even just to verify some of the information that's there, or to there was somebody, I think it might have been James, talked about consistency, way of getting information back into a system and then comparing it for consistency. I think one of the other challenges is that we've got an aging auditor population, and we're not attracting new auditors into the profession. And if we were able to attract new younger people in, they're going to have this mindset anyway. They don't have the mindset of an older auditor who has been used to just doing this checking. Do you do this? Do you do that? These people are more likely to just be looking at the process and be very more challenging, I think, to the technological aspect. That's really all I've got at the moment. I'll be interested to hear what other people are saying.
Thank you, Ben.
Ben, I listened to a presentation just a couple of weeks ago that suggested that if we are relying on the millennials for the future, we're already too late. They're the generation of transition, but the ones that will really embrace the future technologies are going to be their children. So working in ways that can not only attract the millennials and the ones to follow them, I think will be an imperative part of the way forward for us. I don't yet know what the key to unlocking that is, but we must find it.
Yep, I agree.
Good. Adam, would you like to comment?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. Adam McDean, CEO of QMS Certification Services, and also currently the chair of AACB, which is the Association of Accredited Certification Bodies. I agree with all the comments so far. I especially agree with what James touched on, where we have to be careful not to dig into the detail too much here. I think we have to remember that no matter what the new business looks like in terms of a client, what its technology is, we're there to audit a process. And whether they use people or whether they use software, there's still a process. I give people the example of there's a Western Australian company that's developed a robotic bricklaying machine, and they're quite successful. So what they're doing is automating the building process by a robot actually laying bricks instead of people. Now, as an auditor, I don't see any difference to going to that site and auditing the bricklaying process. To me, there's no difference between the robot or a team of bricklayers. We're there to do the process, see if the process is effective and giving them a quality outcome. So I think we have to be careful to think about process audits. Catherine touched on it. We need to be better at process-based auditing and consider that no matter what changes we see, what technologies are being used, there is still a process there to be looked at. I think the way that we can, there's a number of ways we can do that, but we need the accreditation bodies to lead us with this. And as James said, those guys need to be not so much flexible, but creative, I think, in the way that their rules are allowing us to do our jobs as certification bodies. You know, I can see potential, for example, of part of the auditing process becoming a virtual or constant data collection process. For example, if I have a client that allows me permanent access into their IT system, their ERP, whatever it may be, their management system, we could be constantly monitoring that system. And if we take the 80-20 rule, possibly 80% of the compliance side of an audit could be simply monitoring in that way. There's no auditor required in that regard unless their system throws up an anomaly, which would then alert us that there's a potential compliance issue. The beauty of that is what's left to audit that client is all about the value add. And as James said, we have to be very focused on how does, whatever our audit process looks like, how is it adding value to the client? If we don't keep adding value, then the industry will go from 11 billion to 2 billion. We're the ones that have to make sure that it grows, not shrinks.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Andrew, do you have any comment on that?
Something gets to be produced from anywhere along the supply chain. I still beg the question for all of us: how do we use the current resource and upskill that fast enough to be relevant in the current stage, as well as looking forward and replace that population of resource with the future fast enough? And I think we really have to be identifying where the training needs lie and being able to provide some of those resources pretty quickly. And as to whether the capability, this might be heresy to say so too, but whether the capability of the current audit resources is up to some of the skill sets that are going to be needed for working in an environment where you can go into a huge manufacturing operation. We've all seen them, but there are no people. How are we going to do that? And can that be done? So we're not sitting in the boardroom just looking at papers of records of management reviews, but that you're actually walking through an environment of robotics and artificial intelligence and contributing something valuable to the organisation that puts those in place.
So we will now, John,
Well, I've been sitting listening and I'm very impressed with what I've heard. There's a lot of good comments. I'm going to take a little different tack though. And let me just say the following. The number one issue that auditors don't appear to get is the dichotomy between meeting the elements of the standard and meeting that portion of the standard that no one seems to read. That's the scope. If you take 9001 as an example, the scope simply says the purpose of this standard and the purpose of the certification and its accreditation is to make sure that the company being certified and accredited provides products and services that meet the customer requirements and applicable statutory and regulatory requirements and builds customer satisfaction. That's the end game. Now, unfortunately, and my history has been, I've spent 49 years in business, of which the majority have been in the automotive business primarily, and then a little bit in the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system business. So I bought the services, and people are more interested, as I've seen, in buying this service in assuring that we comply to the standard instead of meeting the requirements to produce product or service that meet the customer's requirements. We've lost sight of that, and many of our scheme owners are very interested in feather bedding. That is, people have to be in industry so long before they can be auditors. That's a mistake too, because that says all the issues, all the mindsets that people have, they bring with them. And then instead of listening to customers and how they're living to the standard and getting to the producing products and services that meets the requirements, we're prescriptive, descriptive, and say, this is what it should be. The standard says you must do this. Joseph mentioned that earlier. Customers are more interested in our adjudicating the standard, if you will, rather than building product or service that meet the requirements. And so when I was buying the service, the first thing I said to the certification body is we had to look at our outgoing PPMs. How are we doing against customer requirements? And then work your way back through the process to see how we're doing. Help us succeed at meeting customer requirements. So that's a fundamental. But the second piece is the auditors cost X number of dollars to come in there. Do we create the value in the reports and the output that we do with the customer that they can recoup and better that? And you can only do that by helping them discover what are the things that are impediments to making product that work for the customer and make sure the service and products are successful. Outcomes matter. It doesn't matter about the process as much as it has a process that yields an outgoing product that works. And finally, there are going to be lots of tools that are out there we can use. I heard glasses, I've seen them, virtual audits, computer audits, all sorts of different methods. The real issue is, are the people in the process, are the assessors, are the auditors geared for the change that's coming, that's here right now, quite frankly, and to learn to help use an audit to help the customer find ways at the end game to produce product or service that meets their requirements. Only then are we going to be viewed as a positive source. Let me give you an example from a financial audit I've just been through. So I asked the auditor, one of the biggest issues companies have, and I have it, is that people don't pay on terms. So if the terms are 30 days, customers don't pay that way because controllers know it's not, hey, if I hang on to the cash, it's good. But the requirement says 30 days, and they sign up to that, but they don't do it. And my question to the auditor is, why don't you audit to that? That's not part of our scope. We follow these requirements in GAAP. We don't look at the business practice that makes it successful. And yet, the net cumulative effect of people not paying on terms is significant in every economy. And yet, it's a fundamental issue that the auditing profession in the financial world doesn't see. And so it's those kind of blind spots that people look at us that don't help get customers to produce products and services that meet customer requirements.
So what interests me, John, you raised the question there, amongst other things, of the value of input from people like customers and so on. This whole notion of getting feedback from customers, of including the views of regulators and indeed any other stakeholders that might be relevant. You see, I think we've got the opportunity to bring that to bear much more now than we've ever had in the past, and therefore start looking at the effectiveness of the outcomes of the process. So, you know, so all of these things are actually interwoven and interlinked. They're not disconnected. We've got the tools through things like social media to be able to, at least to some degree, have some input and feedback from all of those other constituencies and stakeholders of the process and company that we're auditing. Why don't we use it?
Good. So that's a nice segue. And John's comments about the technology is here and now. I had asked you all to talk a little bit more about technologies, disruptive technologies and tools and industries, and we more specifically about what's happening with accreditation and certification and auditing, which is good because that is audited by what's coming down the road and what's already worked. We could have just another discussion and perhaps a little bit more detail now about how some of these things that are coming down the road are affecting all of our businesses, in particular, how they're affecting the auditor. Thrown some stuff on the screen, which we didn't really talk about other than artificial intelligence. But what's the effect of self-driving cars going to be? What's the effect of robotics going to be? Quantum computing. How will our lives be when there is this massive exponential growth in computing power that enables us to either be irrelevant or actually enables us to do a whole lot more than we ever dreamed possible? As Andrew alluded to earlier, what's the effect of artificial intelligence going to be? Will we have an artificial auditor? What's the effect of that on a certification body? Will you be sending out artificial auditors to your clients? Will these artificial auditors need to be certified? Will they need training? How will an accreditation body view this? How will ISO update its standards, its management system standards regarding some of these technologies? Also, things like private space transportation systems. This was science fiction just a few years ago. Now Elon Musk has sent a Tesla off to Mars. This stuff is real and here and now. I'd just like you to talk a little specifically about some of this disruptive technology, some of the things that are coming down the pipe, some of the things that perhaps you are already encountering in your businesses that are affecting the audit profession. And let's think outside the box of our traditional, process audit view and some of the issues that we've already covered. And you're welcome to bring those back up and fold them into these conversations as well. And John, why don't we go back to you and have you talk a little bit about that?
I could do a science fiction discussion about many technologies, but if you go back to 1455, I think was a year when the Gutenberg printing press was put in play. The technology was there. The problem was the Bible at that time was printed on that. It was in Latin, and only a limited number of people could read Latin. So the printing press, that wonderful technology, really didn't take off until knowledge caught up. And the fact of the matter is that we are in an exponential time of change for technology. If you think about it, go back 10 years ago, the cell phone, at least the one we know today, wasn't even around. The iPhone came out in January of 2007. The Android came out shortly thereafter. Airbnb came out that year. Kindle came out in that year. And 10 years ago, we've seen a huge amount of change. And look at how many people walk around with cell phones, with earphones in, talking. I mean, look, we must have been boring people back then. So we have been able to pick up with some technology. Others, it takes forever. It was a French Revolution when it introduced, because the serfs were getting taken advantage of, the metric system came about because it was tens. It was a very simple system. Yet it's very difficult across the world to have that system implemented. So I think the number one issue is not going to be technology. It will pull us. We won't push it. And so the real key is, can people's knowledge stay fresh and keep up? Is continual learning something that our people are interested in? Or is it like an extension line? I pull it up, a ratchet, it grabs, and I do my work. The problem is we've got people in business in general who are very comfortable with status quo. Change is difficult. Go into any business and ask or tell them we're going to have change. There are only three possibilities. It get better, stay the same, or get worse. Inside the company, it's always viewed as a negative. Go outside the company with a customer, and they always view it as positive. It's got to be better, and so on. So with all this science fiction, all these things you put on the table, the question isn't about will the technology be something that transforms us? Nope, it's got to be us. It's got to be the people who are willing to learn and build on that. So I think everyone's enamored with Bitcoin. I love it. As a matter of fact, they bid that up so high, it was incredible. I'm more interested in BitChain, where chain of custody I can track the whole way through. That's the sort of technology that will catch an industry. That's the sort of technology that they'll see. It will improve what we're doing with our customer. And so the focus on the combination of knowledge, customer, and using technology to our benefit. Unfortunately, most people are sedate and sedentary and want to stay where they are. I've worked this hard. I know what I'm doing. I'm not changing. And change is inevitable, and that's what's going to bite us. We don't want or like change. It's the only industry I've ever been in, this ISO industry, the only industry I've ever been in where a new product's not even released and everyone's out bad-mouthing it. Everyone. And in any industry I've been in that produces a product or a service, you'd be shot if you did that. In our industry, it's a joy because I have some knowledge and I'll tell you, it's sad. It's a retarding force. And the retarding force is, it ain't gonna fly, Wilbur. Don't let it off the ground because if you do, I've got to change to keep up with it. And that's the number one issue I think we face in the auditing profession. We don't want to change, or we're afraid of the effort it's going to take to change.
Thank you, John. Passionate as always and right on target. James, would you like to weigh in?
Look, I think in terms of technology, the one that interests us at present is the distributed ledgers or blockchain. And this is really interesting from a number of perspectives. You can look at it from two extremes. One, blockchain technology, distributed ledgers, lots of contributors, real-time adjustment, makes auditing redundant, okay? Because the community itself, the people in the supply chain, can actually provide meaningful updates about the performance and reliability of their suppliers, for instance. At the other extreme, that technology is going to exist. So the thing in my mind, and the thing that we're exploring now, is how do you actually position audit and certification to be the key input to that sort of process? Don't deny the fact that the market has really valuable intelligence about the performance of firms and organisations, but recognise that what we've got to offer is a particularly valuable and, in some respects, balanced perspective of the organisation. And that can be supplemented through the technological systems with inputs from a whole range of places. You know? We might be able to say that, look, someone appears to have processes that are relevant to their circumstances. You walk those processes and you see that they deliver what they claim they're delivering to the market. But add to that the opportunity for real-time commentary from their customers that they have actually delivered, and then you're getting really meaningful statements about trust, reliability, and performance, which I think the global market requires. I mean, one of the things that keeps me optimistic about certification and audit is that as the world gets bigger, as technology gets complex, as we get further and further away from understanding the technology ourselves, or the distance between ourselves and our suppliers gets greater, there's an increasingly significant demand for trust symbols and tokens to help markets work. You know? So for me, I'm kind of optimistic that we've got something really worthwhile offering to offer in that scenario. I think, you know, there are some technologies we need to embrace, and in embracing those, don't do it in an exclusive way, but bring into it the sorts of insights from the market that supplement and in some respects confirm what auditing has to say about the performance or the potential performance of a firm.
James, I think you make excellent points and completely agree. It really comes to how we collectively position ourselves as a community to do that, to be able to provide something that really becomes of relevance back to the people that we're working for, those that are charging us to come and do these audits. And I just wonder if we're working fast enough to be able to train the people at the rate that we're doing, or whether we need to sort of have a quantum step forward to move some at least into the sort of future space to be able to use some of those things, to be able to aggregate that information, to be able to reflect it back in the right way to the right people. But it's a great question for us all. How do we position ourselves for the future?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Andrew, just in addition to that, one of the things that we've actually been looking at is really considering whether the type of assessment process, and you can extrapolate that to audit process, is the same depending on, you know, the different types of things. So we're looking at that for product assessment processes. They'd be quite different now to management system, and we would look at different components, almost having a customized assessment process for particular schemes. So not doing the same sort of thing, the same format, not looking at internal audit, management review, corrective action, complaints, spending half a day on that, but actually really sitting down, looking at who the organisation is, what they're actually doing, and having those conversations with them. And through that conversation process, linked in with the other information that we can actually gain about the organisation, then making some informed decisions about how they are in relation to complying with systems.
Yes, and I think on top of that, to then be willing to actually act on the poor performers as much as the good performers, right? Because we're very good at recognising achievement. We issue the certificates and so on and so forth. But what do we really do to pull out those that are not performing, those that are failing, those that are not delivering customer satisfaction, etc., etc. And I think it's the worst of them that pull the whole of us down, you know, that lead to that mediocrity that's resulted from it, and the lack of satisfaction with the services that we provide. So again, here's an opportunity for us to perhaps do that. I'd be interested to hear the certification body views on it.
Joseph, how about you give us your view?
Yeah, I had a couple of points I wanted to make. You know, looking over this list of what are the technologies that we're up against, and a couple of things that came to mind quick and not necessarily related points. And I had a client I was doing some work for not too long ago who wanted to use QR codes. I think we all know what those are. QR codes as a means for providing traceability to product inspection records, product certification records. And they were only questioning, at the time they were saying, you know, is there anything that, any requirements from ISO that are going to feed into this, anything that we need to be aware of? And I looked at it and said, no, the way you've got this set up is perfect. But then, and I put my auditor hat on a different way, and I thought, well, you know, what if I'm an auditor and I want to audit that you're doing this correctly? and that you are encoding everything right, so that when your customer decides they're going to take you up on your traceability method here, and they get their phone out and flash that QR code, that it's going to work properly, and validating that works long term, and again, something to look at, a piece of the future, so to speak. And I forget which panelist it was, but someone, I think it was John, indicated, you know, Bitcoin's interesting, but get me something that gets me traceability all the way back to raw materials. Where's that technology? And the other item that I'm looking at robotics, and I've audited companies, and we've certified companies through PJR that work with robotics. And one point that for me immediately comes to mind, and I suppose you could apply this to any technology, is that at least currently, anything with robotics is at some point going to require human programming, right? And ultimately, what goes in most of the time is going to be rooted in some specification. A significant part of it which is going to be rooted in customer requirements. And you know, so if I audit a company that is a significant part of what they do is programming, again, I can say, look, are you proving that all of these input requirements, the things that your customer specified, the things that are essential for the product, you know, all of those things that come from Section 8.2 of the new standard, 8231 in particular, ensuring that you have all of the requirements that you need to have to render your product or service. And so when you're doing your programming, can you show that you've validated that all of those requirements are upheld? So it does, to a point, come down to what it's always come down to: inputs and outputs, and verifying that the outputs are addressing all of the input requirements. That's a very basic principle that we teach our auditors here at PJR, that that very basic principle of, do the outputs meet the input requirements, and ensuring that that's been upheld. And I think that's going to be true no matter how complicated the technology gets. I think that that aspect of inputs and outputs, and then also from the perspective of the auditor, can the organization explain itself, so to speak, because they've got to be able to explain themselves to their customers, right? So who's to say that they can't be able to explain it to us as well?
Thank you, Joseph. Ben, let's get your perspective.
Yes, interesting the point that Catherine made about auditors sitting in the boardroom doing document reviews. I mean, that's certainly not what we would encourage our auditors to do. But I think we've got more and more access to technology, if you like, that can be used to validate data, and therefore the issue for the auditor is what data do they want to be validated, and what kind of conversations is the auditor having with the people in the organization? Are they in fact talking to the customers? You know, and if you take that customer, the external customer and the internal customer, are they talking to all of these people, and are they identifying how they do their jobs, and are they following the processes? Are they finding ways to add value for the client and the customers of the client? I mean, I think the point that was made about change, I suspect, and this may be part of the problem of having an aging auditor population, but auditors are, I think, quite resistant to change. If you've been used to going out, especially if you've been seeing the same clients over a period, you've got your audit process in your head, you've got your little audit plan, you're going out there and you're effectively, in many cases, doing what you did the last time, and seeing if it's still relevant. Are they still ticking the boxes that they ticked the last time, rather than trying to get inside the heads of the people in the organization and understand perhaps the different challenges that they're facing as they face the changes in technology and the changes in the industry. So I guess before you're going to an audit, you're trying to think, well, what might be different in this organization's business that I should be focusing on. So the technology can help us to do certain things, and as a number of people have said, there will be ways for the data to be validated through technology. But it's the questions that the auditor wants to ask, I think, are some of the things that they need to be thinking about, and that then goes back to, I guess, how do we train and develop our auditors to ask the right questions, and leave the simple validation elements to perhaps the technology solutions.
Right.
That's it from me. Yep.
Thank you, Ben. Adam, how about you?
Yeah, look, I agree with Ben. To me, there's two components to the audit process. There's the data gathering and compliance piece, which we know as technology changes constantly gets easier for us as auditors. 10, 15 years ago, you'd be walking office to office trying to track down records in the back of a filing cabinet somewhere, and that would take the majority of the audit, just trying to track down records. These days, you can sit in that boardroom that we've talked about. You can sit in that boardroom for a couple of hours with corporate intranet and find every record you want without leaving your seat. So that piece of the audit process becomes very simple, and I think could be automated in some way as us as auditors and certification bodies adopt technologies. What excites me about that is that frees up more of the audit time for the auditors to go and, someone said earlier, almost become a business analyst. We obviously can't consult to the client, but we should be able to spend that time looking at the processes out on the shop floor or wherever it is, and being able to challenge the processes or steps in the process. And to me, that is where the change needs to be in training of the auditors. They do need to be trained in business processes, business analyst type functions, where they can actually challenge the parts of the process with the client in a evaluating way. In terms of adopting technology, we constantly push our own processes, making technology work for us in the audit process. There'll be a point where we can't make any more changes. You can't automate the audit process forever. What we see as exciting is what happens after the audit. Things like artificial intelligence, I think, may be useful in certification decisions, for example, or parts of the certification decision. If we can teach a computer, what a good audit reads like and what a bad audit reads like, over time it can learn to accept and reject based on rules. That would allow more of the overall time to be evaluating for the client.
Yeah, Adam, Andrew again. It's interesting that you should say these things, because certainly through my tenure as an auditor over 25 odd years, we were certainly taught about asking questions and listening to answers. That was very much what you did. You went and you spoke to people, you asked questions, you worked it out. And as you quite rightly say, in this day and age, you could probably find, from a compliance perspective, the answers considerably quicker in that 2 hours in the boardroom that then offers you the opportunity to become something different, to be one of data analysis, to take that much wider plethora of data out there and analyse that and interpret that back to your audience. And I wonder if that's not where our role is becoming. Certainly that's not what I think we're currently teaching auditors, either incumbent auditors or ones coming into it. And whether I would have the skill sets to do that, I frankly doubt. But I think perhaps younger people might be much better at data analysis than I am. It was interesting, somebody, I'm sure it was from Intel, posed the question to their team at some stage was, if they were not there, who would replace them? And I think that's almost the question for us. If we were not here with this type of auditors that we are, questions and answers, compliance approach and so on, who's going to replace us? Who's going to be useful to those industry sectors that will choose to pay that money to bring us in to offer something of value to them? And I can't help believing that there will be some form of data analysis, whether that be automated or with a human interpretation over the top of it, perhaps a mixture of both.
All right, thank you, Andrew. I'm going to move on to the next topic, and I think in the interest of time, rather than having every panelist comment on this segment, I'm just going to ask you to digitally raise your hand by clicking on the raise your hand icon or private messaging me and letting me know if you want to jump in here. But we've talked a lot about a lot of different things so far, but I guess somebody might be thinking, does new necessarily mean different? Does auditing need to change just because technology is? I mean, auditing principles are auditing principles. I just welcome some commentary on that from some of you. And Andrew, you might have a comment on that to start us off.
Well, I probably made a few comments leading you to where I think things are going to be. I think this is an area that's going to rapidly change. I think we have to embrace the technologies. I think we have tools there that we could already be using, things like your Siris and your smartphones to carry the standards, to be able to do multiples of them, to give you best case studies and so on. Yes, I actually do think that new means that we're going to need to be different.
Anyone else like to comment? You can just unmute yourself or raise your hand. All right, I'm going to move on to the next topic then. So how are we preparing for the future as accreditation bodies, certification bodies, and personnel certification bodies? What are we doing now to adapt to the change that's already here and the change that's coming both from a technology perspective and also from the very valid, points that you've all made leading up to this point? And again, Andrew, I'll ask you to comment on that.
Yes, let me start, because I think we've had the opportunity over the last 12 months or so to take a view of what's our role in the community that we serve, which is the certification bodies, the auditors, with input from the accreditation bodies and so on, all of which to an eye to these sorts of things. So we're trying to move ourselves into a space through actually exercises very much like this, through virtual online auditor seminars, to be able to start aggregating some of the thinking and the data that we've got so that we can start to inform people like training providers and our wider constituents as to where we need to be moving and what we need to be doing. I'm very much of the view that we need to be collaborative in this. We need to be working together as a network as much as competing in and between ourselves. I think we've done that for far too long, and what we've found is a position of mediocrity that is becoming a grave risk, at least, of becoming irrelevant. So I think we've got to start talking to each other, listening to each other, working together to prepare some of these materials and get ready for that new world.
And John, I'm going to ask you to comment on this, if you would.
Well, we've been after this a number of years to take a look at what we could do in collaboration with certification bodies to build a better process. And so one of the ways we've done that is picking up on what's happened in the world of standards and saying most of our customers, most of our direct customers have integrated audits. so that we can take a look across a number. When we go in once, we can take a look across a number of different of the particular standards, so that we're not coming in repetitively. And we're working with others like James and Jazans and other AVs to cooperatively use what they're doing to build the need or the requirement base that we have to review. So I think there's some fundamentals that we're doing, but the larger issue, and the larger issue for all of us, is the value in the form of the customer. And unfortunately, many scheme owners are recalcitrant. They, as I say, are feather bedders. They keep people from their industry employed after retirement. And it's leapfrogging that and finding industries that are more innovative and more interested in results than keeping tabs. And I'm a little different than you, Andrew. I don't believe any data in and of itself is sufficient. I believe that auditing is a people process. It's one that you look at and see how businesses are run. I like James's point. Our people need to be less focused on the technology and more focused on the business. And the aspects of the business that make it work are its processes and how its people play to get their results. So I think it's less focused on the detailed or granular technology and more on the business and assuring that that business has its constituencies, being interested parties, customers, anyone out there, being served properly, and not just do they meet the checkbox requirements, so that they can say, yes, we have all the elements covered in the standard.
Yeah, John, I don't disagree with you that there's still and always should be a person-to-person element to this. My comments around the data is that it's an opportunity for us to use data to enhance the return back to the customer. And I suppose I'm far from the granular level of that, but more at the big data level of that is the use of data with insights that they may not have available to themselves from in and between sector participants and so on, so that you're bringing that out to to really contribute something of value back, but big data rather than granular necessarily. I agree, no point whatsoever in raising non-conformance about minor things that really are not of any consequence. Much more helpful to take the bigger view of here's how you can really do something to improve.
And also, in addition to what we all are doing, what do other bodies need to be doing, like ISO, industry, government, regulatory bodies? John, would you like to comment on that?
You know, ISO standards are built around a process that they have in consensus building. So it will never be bleeding edge. It will be a consensus-based process. So they aren't going to lead in the sense of, I'll give you an example, in the new 9001, there was a whole body of people who were more toward the bleeding edge and wanted innovation be spelled out in there. The company should have an innovative process. That didn't make it this time. It's that sort of thing that will not come from ISO per se. And the standard itself is at best a foundation. The companies who use the standard are using some foundation pieces to build their case for meeting their customer requirements. And so the places that we can work are in the areas where we intersect. ABs with CBs, CBs with their customers. The whole issue of how we interface with consultants and how do they deal with building the system. Too many of them, I believe, are like going to an outfit and get a paint by numbers thing, as opposed to truly understanding the finesse and the things necessary to make a company tick. So I think there are a whole lot of things that we can do collectively. Andrew said it earlier. I think we form a pretty strong tapestry if we can keep it together and keep focused on things like this, that is advancing the state of the art, not just complaining about the other guy or what someone else should do, but what can we do collectively to move it forward now?
Thank you. Ben, would you like to comment?
Yep, I think one of the challenges we within the AACB, and I think Adam can confirm this, we've had a bit of a conversation about how we as a group of generally smaller certification bodies can work together in terms of making sure our audit, well, making sure we have a good pool of auditors that whilst we're competing, we have the same interests, if you like, and we could try and get those auditors working to provide consistent service to a group of certification bodies. Now, most of us are using contractors as auditors rather than employees. And I think that's something that we could work between small groups of certification bodies and Exemplar and also with JASANS to say, so what is the clear expectation of auditors? At the moment, we've got the rules, if you like, the ISO 17021, etc., that says this is what an auditor must be able to do. But then what do the individual certification bodies expect from their auditors, other than just making sure they're competent to audit the standard? What do they how do they expect their auditors to behave in their interactions with the client? And if let's just say an auditor has gone through the Exemplar process of being deemed competent for an ISO 9001 audit, then are we as a certification body able to say, okay, that auditor has demonstrated that they have all the knowledge to meet the requirements of 17021, etc. And then all we need to do is verify that competence through a witness audit so that they can translate that knowledge into meeting the audit requirements, how they interact with the client, etc. At the moment, I feel that we're all trying to work with demonstrating competency in different ways, and we're all facing the same issue of demonstrating auditor competence and therefore conducting really good audits for our clients. So some way of Exemplar, the certification bodies and the accreditation bodies working together to try and get a consistent approach would be helpful, I think. That's it.
All right, thank you. Adam, would you like to comment? We'll let you have the last word as the panelist.
Sure, thank you. So yes, Ben's spot on in what he says. At the association level, we are constantly talking about this issue, not just among CBs, but regularly with Exemplar and with, in our case, JASANS as an AB. I think we all recognise and agree that there's a lot of potential if we do work together to get these things right. You know, the competence issue that Ben raised is a great example, and in our case, JASANS needs to be sort of leading the charge with this. You know, their assessors will constantly challenge us as to how do we verify competence of an auditor, and as Ben says, if he has an auditor that's been with him for a long time and is competent, I then start using that auditor. JASANS will put me through the ringer about how I've checked competency, how I've verified competency. There should be a much simpler process there. So definitely, you know, us working together as an industry, and that's just one example, would be beneficial for everybody. Just quickly on what needs to change also, I think we have to remember industry and especially government in Australia, particularly from our point of view, these guys are driving the requirements for certification. It's put into tender requirements, pre-qualification programs, that is where the demand comes from for certifications in most cases. Those guys only see it as for them, a box ticking exercise and only look at it from a compliance perspective. So I think as an industry, we need to teach every other industry and teach government what the real benefits of someone holding a certification actually means. And there's a lot of ways that we could all work together to show those values. You know, there's studies being done in the past on how can you measure the economic benefits of certification, and take a cohort of certified companies, measure their outputs over time, whether it be financial, customer satisfaction, and so on. There's got to be some good messages there that we can teach industry and teach government. And hopefully that then forces them to change their approach to requiring certification. And that should then feed down to all of us.
Thank you, Adam.
I think that's
Andrew?
a great point, Adam. You know, they always say that you can't change other people, you can only change yourselves. And I think this is a prime example of this being true. Much as we might wish for ISO to get up to pace with it, I don't think they're ever going to do, as John quite rightly said. In the absence of that, who is going to define the standards and benchmark? Well, there's a chance for us. Industry is already changing so rapidly that our struggle is to keep up with them. And government, frankly, is their duty is to underpin the best interests of their constituency, which is the lowest common denominator in many respects of unacceptable levels of risk and so on. So we don't necessarily expect them to lead either. So it's incumbent on us, I think, to take the opportunity to work together to, exactly as Adam expressed there, to show the benefits of this. I think the challenge for us is, can we do that quick enough? Have we got the talent to do it currently? Or do we need to accept that we've got some limitations and start bringing in some new ideas and some new training and implement that pretty quickly? ISO, you know, works in years, cycles of years to come up with even amendments to standards, let alone new ones. We can't afford that time. It really is time for us to act pretty quickly.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Well, we've come to the end of our time together. I want to thank all of our panelists for your excellent participation. We've had quite a lively discussion. It's an exciting and somewhat anxious time for the world of auditing. We're quite literally at the dawn of a new age, an age of artificial intelligence and exponential growth in computing power that will either render us obsolete or more likely allow us to do and create a future beyond our wildest dreams. I want to thank you all for your participation, for joining us for today's webinar. We'd like to invite you to the next one, which is the impact of artificial intelligence on the future of auditing, presented by Elmer Corbin of IBM's Watson team. This will be on March 22nd. Check the Exemplar Global website for more details soon. Again, thank you all. This concludes today's session.